I've got the chassis of the Trailfinder 2 complete now. This is pretty much a stock build. Nothing really changed from the original RC4 drive setup. So just want to go over what I did and how I built it and what electronics I used.
Team Baxter.
So I had a lot of fun building this kit, and it was a lot different than other kits that I've built. I'd say it's along the lines of a SCX-10 or a G-made sawback with the dual frame, the dual rail frame, and the cross braces, just like the other platforms. There's little differences here in the cross supports and the motor plate and electronics plate and battery plate. Of course, the transmission and the transfer cases are different and the layout's different, but all in all, it's still a similar sort of setup. It uses a leaf spring suspension system that's with a minimally effective shock and some leaf springs that you adjust to your liking. They are a lot stiffer than other trucks I own with leaf spring systems, but that's the nature of this Trailfinder, and I plan to run it with the leaf system. I will not be linking this. I'm running this as a scale truck, and that's the way it is. It's got the RC4 drive wagon wheels on there, with some mud thrashers from RC4 drive, which aren't the best, but definitely aren't the worst tires either. They've got a decent grip on them, and they seem to do okay. They crawl pretty well. This won't be doing too much crawling. It doesn't have a whole lot of articulation. I mean, it barely comes up an inch off of the ground before the rest of the wheels start coming up. So, not really a crawler. This is indeed a scale truck, and it has the body to go along with that. This kit came with plastic bumpers, front and rear. The front bumper has holes for a winch, but I don't think that I'll be able to run a winch with this very flexy plastic bumper, so I'm probably going to switch those out at some point, but as I said before, I want to kind of run this in a stock form first. The only thing I changed pretty much from the original setup is the posts that were here, really for no specific reason. I moved to the rear in order to get rid of the long post that came with it. It came with long posts that you put a body clip in, and I didn't want those posts hanging out of the rear of the truck, out of the bed. So I ended up taking those out, and I put these metal posts in, and now I screw the bed right onto that. So that's pretty much the only change. Instead of the posts that were here, I'll put a little axial spacer there just to kind of stop the battery from moving back and forth, which wouldn't have been a problem anyway because it's strapped down pretty securely with these straps here. The straps are a little long, but they wrap around underneath and they hold it pretty well. The transmission setup is pretty simple. It has a 2-speed transmission, which is controlled by servo. And the 2-speed transmission feeds a transfer case, which then puts the power out to the front and rear axles. The axles consist of very little, just the axle shafts that run out to the wheels. So it's very minimalistic transmission setup. The 2-speed transmission is one of the simplest I've seen, and there's a lot of space in there for the selector to move. So it's really smooth setup with the 2-speed transmission. It runs an open spur gear cover, which I'm not a fan of, but there's no way to cover that spur gear up. And very minimal clearance here between the edge of the spur gear and the rail. I have run it in the house, and the spur, it's clear, it's no problem. I don't like that it's so close. Something could get caught in there, but my wires have been tied down pretty securely, and we'll just have to see how it goes. I know a lot of people run this truck, so it couldn't be that big of a problem, and if it is, there's a solution for it. The electronics are middle of the road all the way down. I have a Castle Sidewinder 3 in here. This is, if you've seen any of my other rigs, you know that this is my standard ESC. I like to use this in pretty much everything I run. The Sidewinder 3 feeds power to the 45 turn RC 4-wheel drive motor. I'm running an RC 4-wheel drive motor because I'm running an RC 4-wheel drive truck. I generally run axial sealed throwaway cans, but they don't have a 45 turn, and that's really the motor I wanted to run in this truck. So I got one of RC 4-wheel drives. It's also the motor that comes in the RTR version of this truck, so can't go wrong with putting the RTR motor. Well, you can, but it'll be okay in this instance. The steering is controlled by a high-tech waterproof servo, a 5646WP. This is also another standard that I use in pretty much all of my vehicles unless it requires a smaller one or I need a little bit more power. I'm using 5646 for the steering servo and for the shifting servo. I've had previous experience with 2-speed transmission, and in my opinion I feel like the micro and mini servos just don't give enough power to push the shifting mechanism. So I wanted to go with a full-size servo here, and it's already set up to accommodate a full-size servo, so I just went ahead and put one in. High-tech servo with the metal servo horn. I had to cut the top off just a little bit to clear my body. This wouldn't be a problem, but I did a little extra work on my body, so I had to cut the top of that servo horn off just to give it a little bit more clearance as it moves back and forth so it doesn't hit the undercarriage of the body. Both of these servos are backed up by Castle BEC, which I'm running at 7.4 volts, which gives me just enough power in steering and in shifting for what I need. Probably overkill on the shifting, but overkill is better than not having enough power. So the BEC runs right to the power. I don't run it to the servo. I haven't so far in my RC experiences needed to, so it's just something that I don't do at this point. All of this runs to a non-waterproof receiver that I have in this box. It is the one non-waterproof point in this truck, and the receiver box is fairly well sealed up other than the hole where the wires go in, but I don't plan on running this truck in deep water. The waterproof electronics are just a coincidence, and I'm rating this truck for water up to about the battery plate, and I shouldn't be running it in water that high, so the non-waterproof receiver shouldn't be too much of a problem. That's about it for the electronics. Really simple setup here. Really cleaned it up, tying all the wires down with the zip ties in order to give it a nicer profile. There's not really a whole lot of wires there, and a little bit extra ran into the receiver box, so everything's tight. I plan on running a 2S 5000 milliamp battery, another standard in Team Baxter world, because they provide plenty of power, and I rarely need to change batteries while I'm on the trail. Maybe 1 or 2 battery changes for even long trail runs. So really like those 5000 milliamps. So I had a really good time with this build. I took my time on this one. I've been working on this truck actually for almost a month, which is supremely abnormal for my kit builds. I normally zip through them pretty quickly just because I'm an impatient by nature. But I went ahead and took my time with this one and tried to get it just right. I hope it performs well when I take it out on the trail. It's certainly built to perform well. Everything's beefy on here except for the drive shafts, which are plastic, which will need to be changed out at some point. We'll see how they do, but I don't expect them to do particularly well. But I want to run this in stock form and see how it does before I start doing a whole bunch of upgrades. They may perform just fine I actually doubt it, but we'll see how it goes. So that wraps up the RC four-wheel drive Trailfinder 2 chassis build. I'm going to talk a little bit about the top, then I'm going to connect the two and get this thing on the trail.